Nick Fuentes went after the Lord of the Rings, and I took that personally. In this household, the Lord of the Rings is sacred. You don't criticise it. You know, this organisation, Lotus Eaters, normally I don't speak for all of Lotus Eaters, but I can on this issue, because all of us love the Lord of the Rings, and we are going to bat for it. We're going to put this down. Nick, you know, and his Grouper army are fools for insulting the Lord of the Rings, although it is fair to say that many of his own followers did push back against him for it.
I'm glad to hear it.
So there is some degree of sense there. So let's hear what he has to say. I do apologise for what he's like.
Spoiler sent $20. You call me an idiot for asking a regular ass question. Your solutions are just a variation of low, go to college or something. But at least I'm not a Game of Thrones enjoyer fag. Preferring that slop over LOTR is a crazy self-report.
Yeah, self-report that I'm awesome. That's a filter. That's a filter. If you like Lord of the Rings more than Game of Thrones, that is a self-report that you're a LARPer. You like gay little hobbits? Gay little hobbits and the magic of friendship? I like people getting their heads chopped off for no reason, because that's life. And that's life. A sword swinging around, chopping everybody's heads off at random. And you like the power of friendship and magic rings and little elves and the power of their friendship and big gay wizards. Big gay wizards. They made him gay, didn't they? Or am I thinking about Harry Potter? Didn't they?
It is worth mentioning the actor that plays Gandalf, Ian McKellen, I think is gay. Maybe that's what he's confusing with. But
make the wizard
pointless.
Gay or bisexual or something? That's what I know. It's not in the original Tolkien or whatever, but that's what you like. So yeah,
sorry.
I do.
Does he? You know, Lord of the Rings is Catholic. Yes, written by Tolkien. Yeah.
Like Tolkien, and it's incredibly Catholic.
There are so many allegories to Christianity within the storyline, but it's done in such a way that it can be recognised by people who aren't even Christian as being a sort of transcendental piece of art. Right? It evokes the virtues within people without necessarily having to be an adherent. And I think, as Luca's talked about before, Tolkien wrote this to be a mythology for the English, right?
Yes, for England, because we'd lost so much of it during the time of the Viking invasions. And even, of course, a text like Beowulf, though still wonderful and obviously penned probably by an Anglo-Saxon monk, of course, in its origins, it is continental. It's Germanic, it comes from the tale of the Danes and the Geats, and, so it's of another people. And so Tolkien wanted to find something to replace what we'd had personally lost. And so in that way, when you have a corporation like Amazon, right, trying to make it inclusive, it's like, well, if we can just stick enough foreign faces in it, it becomes for everyone. It's like, yeah, but this is what you don't understand, right? Not all stories have to be made for everyone. Some stories, the most powerful stories, respond to a particular people, and that's why The Lord of the Rings is continually, topped as the favourite book of the British public, because we understand it, because we see it ourselves represented in its story.
When I read Chinese literature, I don't want some random white guy inserted in it.
No.
It is silly. It's a silly argument. But he does carry on. I'm only going to play a little bit more. But it does lead to a wider discussion about these sorts of things. And there was basically almost, civil war. Not in the Tim Pool sense, but in the rights were very angry with one another. And it created a new fault line.
Like Game of Thrones. You're right. I do like Game of Thrones better than Lord of the Rings. And that is a self-report, but not like you think. No, the opposite is true. And Game of Thrones is awesome. So.
It's not finished, though, is it?
Anyway. No, that's true. We'll leave it there because I don't want to listen to this blasphemy anymore. But he did, triple down. He initially said it, then he doubled down there, and he tripled down here. And he says, it's not even rage bait. I fell asleep watching every single Lord of the Rings movie because they're boring. There's too much crying and talking about friendship, and I effing hate the Hobbits. I thought the Ranger was cringe. The CGI is terrible. Game of Thrones was awesome. And I would like to point out that you don't have to pick a side here. I like Game of Thrones as well.
Yeah, I do.
And, particularly, I haven't read the books of Game of Thrones. I've read the Lord of the Rings books. So I can't judge those. But other than the last 2 series of Game of Thrones, I really, really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed every episode, barring 1 or 2. And I thought it was relatively well done. But I don't think it's comparable to The Lord of the Rings as a piece of art. And some other people were coming out and saying things like, saying you like Lord of the Rings over Game of Thrones or any other morally grey universe is basically a self-report that you see the world in simple black and white terms rather than trying to grasp its complexity. It's more about intellect than it is about taste. And
is it really, Ubersoy?
Yes, and I had quite a rebuttal.
Well done, Josh.
Well done.
You're welcome. I wasn't feeling particularly intellectual. When you come for Lord of the Rings, I am going for the jugular, I'm afraid. But we are going to talk about this in particular, this line, because I don't think The Lord of the Rings is boring. I think most people will agree that it's a very captivating series that draws you in immediately. So I'm not going to try and dispute that, because I think that's for you guys to sort of understand and appreciate. But what I am going to do is
also,
talk about...
So can I just say on that point as well, because I've met people in my life who thought The Lord of the Rings was boring, and they're not in my life anymore. But more than that,
They're still missing to this day.
more than that, right? My point is actually that you can actually be bored on a personal level by a film and still appreciate it, right? You can still look at it in an objective way and you say, I get why it's brilliant, I get why people adore it, it's just not my thing. That's something totally different. But to just say, oh, it's boring, is and therefore no one should be it's very low. It's very low.
So I wanted to talk about an example of someone who isn't necessarily black and white in great detail, and talk about Theoden and his sort of hero's journey. So, speaking of hero's journey, Stelios,
Nice.
obviously hero of Greece, will teach you the ways of virtue and ethics, so you can recreate the Lord of the Rings in your own life by being a virtuous hero, and you can pay in 3 installments if you don't want to pay in one sum. He spent an inordinate amount of time working on this. He was working on it for a few months before I left full time, and so
You left?
yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm a contributor now.
First
I'm actually full time.
First I've heard of it.
I'm back with a vengeance, like a rash, but worse. But anyway, let's talk about Theoden, shall we? So he starts off as a thrall of Saruman. He doesn't really have any agency whatsoever. He's having things whispered in his ear to the point where he is unfazed by the death of his own son, and he casts out Éomer, his nephew, isn't he? From his kingdom, even though he's been nothing but loyal to him and is right about everything. And then, of course, Gandalf comes out, breaks the spell, and
Great scene.
it's a fantastic scene. I watched it last night. I stayed up really late watching as much of The Lord of the Rings as I could. For research purposes, obviously, and not just because I'm watching it for the millionth time. But so he starts at a very low place. He, obviously he's being controlled by another person. And I think the beauty of Tolkien is that he's not talking about the interpersonal conflict or the conflict between kingdoms like in Game of Thrones. He's talking about the conflict within ourselves. I think that's far more interesting in a piece of art, because most of us aren't in the position to govern the conflicts of kingdoms. We're not key players in that sort of thing. We're ordinary people. And ordinary people are more interested in how to be a good person in their own life, in their own little kingdom, rather than on a national level necessarily. So it's more pertinent, more relevant to most people, and I think there's more beauty in it because it's so easy to understand. The intricacies of governance aren't necessarily beautiful, are they? No. It's a weird thing to say. Whereas the intricacies of, a human soul, there is beauty there, and I think that this is far richer substrate for beautiful art to grow.
I was going to say, can you get that with Game of Thrones? Can you literally reel off something as, meaningful and as poetic for Game of Thrones? Or is it just about chopping people's heads off, like Nick said?
It's sort of the more basal aspects of humanity. And the part of the reason I quite enjoyed Game of Thrones is that it does show a more accurate depiction of the real world, because it's inspired by a lot of true historic events. But the problem is that a lot of the higher ideals that it tries to explore, it doesn't really understand. And I think that that's because rather than by Tolkien, it's written by a great big fat American man, rather than a professor of Anglo-Saxon.
American man.
Yeah.
Is he religious? Is he an atheist?
I think he might be an atheist. But, this is no disrespect to George R.R. Martin's writing. I have read little bits. I've not even read all of the first book.
Books. They are wonderful.
Yeah. So, but I'm saying that the qualities the man has aren't as rich as that of Tolkien. Therefore, that
fought in the Somme.
Yeah, exactly.
Divine inspiration, I would say.
Yeah.
There's another aspect as well to Grima's character and the words that he spins into Theoden's ear, which is also just the point that to listen to the voice that tells you not to trust your own strength, that inaction is the way forward, not to do anything, not to be virtuous, not to rise above, not to defend, not to preserve.
Well, there are so many lessons, and we're going to end on one in The Lord of the Rings for the current time, and it's part of its timelessness that makes it a beautiful work of art. And so when he comes to, after he escapes the thrall of Saruman, there's a really touching scene which always pretty much brings me as close to tears as a man can, where he talks about the flower that grows on the graves of his ancestors, Symbolmuna, I think he calls it. And I'm going to read the quote here. "Ever has it grown on the tombs of my forebears, now it shall cover the grave of my son. Alas, that these evil days should be mine, the young perish and the old linger, that I should live to see that last days of my house." And then he stops and says, "No parent should have to bury their child," and collapses to his knees in tears. You see this stoic man return to form, only to be broken down again at his lowest point, losing his son. And rather than a king, you see a man and a very human relationship. And this makes you feel for the man. You see that he's a good man.
The whole character is masterfully portrayed by Bernard Hill, who obviously passed away last year, but what a loss, because he was incredible.
Rest in peace, yeah. So he goes to Helm's Deep, and this is presented in the films in particular as a sort of mistake, that he was trapping himself. But he's not necessarily doing a bad thing, but he's scared for the fate of his people. He wants to protect them, and it's not necessarily ignoble, but a strategic mistake, as they rightly point out in the film, in The Two Towers particularly. And this fear of not being able to live up to that of his ancestors and not being a strong enough man is reasonable given his position, I think, as well. And as the siege goes on...
May I just say one thing as well
course,
about his relationship with Aragorn as well, which is that, of course, Aragorn is older than him, right? But Aragorn, being of Ludunadine, still has lots and lots of time. Theoden is against the clock. He's already an old man. And so, though Aragorn has this vitality and is wise beyond his appearance because he actually has a number of years on Theoden, it contributes to Theoden's insecurities around Aragorn. This is me just purely talking about the films.
No, that's very true, and an important point. But through Aragorn, you've segued perfectly, through Aragorn basically encouraging him to face one last stand, he charges out of the keep of his castle, out across the bridge when all hope is lost, presumably to his death, but he has the bravery to charge forwards anyway. And I think that he realises it's within himself to confront evil and that he has the bravery to do it. But he does acknowledge in the films that it was Aragorn that helped him, encourage him, and find this bravery, and that the victory wasn't truly his, which is actually quite fair, really.
Yeah, it is.
He does do that.
Well, it's to be a wise leader. It's to be aware of your own shortcomings. It's to recognise greatness in others as well. This is part of what makes a great king. And obviously for Tolkien, the virtues of a good king were the highest ideals that mankind could really exhibit.
I very much agree with Tolkien on that one. And of course, his nephew, who was previously estranged, he is reunited with him, and they help save the day. And then I think his virtues are truly realised in the charge of the Rohirrim. This is his moment of bravery. No one else can be attributed to it. He gives a rousing speech, and he charges down the enemy, shouting death, because they believe they're going to their death and that the battle cannot be won, but they charge anyway because they know it is the right thing to do, which I think is the ultimate test of bravery. I think there's also lots of allegories here to Tolkien in the First World War charging over the top to their death and it being inevitable. It's very difficult not to draw this parallel.
As well as the historical parallel with the Polish Hussars at the Siege of Vienna against the Ottomans as well, which I think is part of the inspiration for
it. But I think that Tolkien has first-hand experience of this sort of thing, right? And so he's able to depict it in such a, an emotionally resonant way, I suppose is the way to say it. And the fact that it is Theoden that is right at the front, I know in the book he's said to be speeding at the enemy with, the weight of his forebears behind him faster than he possibly could, basically saying that he is about as resolved to meet the enemy as it is possible to be. And
can I just say one other thing about the charge at the Pelennor Fields as well?
Of course.
To come back to Nick's point about those gay little hobbits, is the fact that, of course, Merry is in that charge, right, as well. And, obviously, the Hobbit is just your archetypical Englishman. It's just your everyday Englishman from the Shires.
Well, I think they represent just normal people who might have been conscripted in the army in Tolkien's day.
Who can find more courage and bravery than they perhaps realise they were capable of, just living their quiet, happy existence. But actually, an Englishman can go out into the world. He can do great deeds. He can perform great feats of bravery.
I mean, if you look at it very simply, they're little people that are able to achieve great things, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's not that hard to extrapolate an analogy from. And his charge is so heroic that Theoden can only be stopped by the embodiment of death itself, more or less. I mean, this is sort of the Platonic ideal of death, the Witch King of Angmar, I believe.
Such good armour.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
You want to play Warhammer?
That's my commentary for the Witch King. Just, my God, he looks great.
But even then, he was able to inspire his adopted daughter, Eowyn, to defend him to his last and defeat what is previously believed to be an undefeatable enemy. She is motivated not only by her desire to protect her kingdom and her family, but her love for him, and because he is a good man. And so she did the heroic act out of this love for him, basically.
And the point is, with all these things that inspire virtue, bravery, honour, love, these are things beyond the understanding of Sauron. Right? The point is that the Dark Lord has no utility for these.
Nick Fuentes has no utility for things like honour and bravery. He just gets bored by it, apparently. So he spends his last moments in a fitting way, I think. With his adopted daughter, who he inspired and who he loves, and who he's very proud of. And I think the line that stuck with me here is, "My body is broken, I go to my fathers, and even in their mighty company I shall not now be ashamed." And of course, now is the important word, that he recognises that he is worthy of their company, that he has lived up to these expectations. And how this could be black and white, I do not know. Like, this is so obviously a very nuanced look at a person who has lost hope, who doesn't have self-confidence, finding their courage with the right guidance and the right circumstances, and making something greater of themselves that is worthy of remembrance.
And Tolkien just plays it so masterfully in his writing as well, because, of course, there is another character, prominent ruler, who dies at the same time as Theoden, and that's, of course, Denethor, right? And so do you want to go out like Theoden, or do you want to go out like Denethor?
There's a clear contrast between the two, sort of like the Fellowship and the Nine, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there are also other examples, of course. Oh, yeah, there's this one. I forgot I quoted myself here. A bit embarrassing. This is the morally black and white media here. This is, of course, from Treebeard. I am not altogether on anybody's side, because nobody is altogether on my side, if you understand me. Nobody cares for the woods as I care for them, not even elves nowadays, which could have come out of my mouth minus the elves part. You know, big defender of trees, me.
Just not elves.
There aren't any. Obviously a nuanced faction, I suppose, if you could call them that, because they recognise that there's no one on their side and no one's coming to help them. And of course this is a comment on industrialisation, isn't it, that no one cares for trees. And you should. And I agree with Tolkien's perspective here, sort of an anti-industrial vein to it. And of course there are other examples here. Boromir, he is not a morally black and white character, is he?
One does not simply forget about Boromir.
No. Fantastic character, though. And, you know, in the end, he does redeem himself, but he's constantly, susceptible to the corruption of the ring and the draw of the power.
Sin.
I mean, I'd just be humble about it and say I think it's the greatest on-screen death in all of cinema. I genuinely do. Like, name me a better one. It's unbelievable.
He does have the hero's death in the end after, you know, trying to take the ring from Frodo, the one thing he swore not to do. And of course there's Aragorn as well. And I'd like to read an extract from the books about Aragorn, because of course this speaks of many things to do with his character. All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring, renewed shall the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. And of course this is talking about his future, and how his old lineage can be revitalized and it can be born anew. And how is this not an excellent parallel for the modern day, when things are corrupted, when things need to be born anew, how things are rootless? People are rootless.
That's a direct link to obviously Christ as well in the biblical story, which is clearly, you know, drawing parallels with that.
You have all of these, not quite the right word, but just items or, you know, things throughout the history of Middle-earth that kind of echo down the ages, and even though they have to be transformed, like... say, for example, the White Tree of Gondor. You know, that's obviously withered by the time you get to the events of Return of the King. But like that tree itself was taken as a sapling from the Garden of Numenor, which in itself was a gift from the... And so there's always an attempt by evil to destroy these things. Or like the light that Frodo has in Shelob's Lair, the light of Erendil. That light comes from the original light of the two trees of the Valar. And even though Morgoth destroyed them, and then they went to stole the Silmarils, that the light was taken, and on it goes until eventually all you've got left is this tiny little vial of light. But the light is still there, right? And Frodo carries that light. And so Tolkien's using this incredible legendarium of, you know, 50,000 years and just showing how to preserve these things. They might never be the true splendor that they were in the very beginning, but that doesn't mean, you know, casting them away or destroying them.
Absolutely. And lots of people are talking about this sort of thing. Here's Howling Mutant saying, I know as a right-winger, when it comes to consuming media, what I'm really looking for is a strong sense of moral relativism. Just some excellent sarcasm there.
That's good.
And I quite like this as well. In my story, I do not deal in absolute evil. I do not think there is such a thing, since that is zero. I do not think that at any rate, and any rational being is wholly evil. And this is, of course, Tolkien himself saying this. So, you know, he didn't even believe in it himself. Here's another one here. Who the heck can read Tolkien and think it's black and white? Is Denethor all bad? Is Boromir, is Frodo all good? One of the central, most important characters in the whole book is Gollum, and he's ambiguous as hell. Anyway, Game of Thrones isn't morally grey. It's grey and black without any white. Just as dull and predictable as what they falsely think Lord of the Rings is. And I don't agree with that last part. I think that you've got to be a bit more charitable to Game of Thrones. I still enjoy it, and I still think it's good media. It's just not on the same level as the Lord of the Rings.
Lots of incest.
Yeah, it's the basal human instincts represented rather than the most transcendental ones. Here's another one that they're talking about battles. The Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones is the best battle. I'm sorry, but, Helm's Deep, the Battle of Pelennor Fields, the Last Stand outside the Black Gate, all fantastic.
Yeah, with the Mouse of Sauron.
I mean, even the fight in Balin's Tomb with the Fellowship is
Trying to see.
filmed.
Aha! Here I am. Yeah, there we go. And lots of people agreed with me that obviously the charge of
Sensible
Rohirrim,
people.
yes, and people pointing out that this shot here is just inspired by the one of Aragorn.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, clearly.
Yeah,
Clearly.
yeah. They are very similar, and in fact, this one's much better.
Way superior.
And I really liked this as well. I don't know who this person is, W.H. Auden, but it was a review of Lord of the Rings, and I think they get it. Evil, that is, has every advantage but one. It is inferior in imagination. Good can imagine the possibility of becoming evil, hence the refusal of Gandalf and Aragorn to use the ring. But evil, defiantly chosen, can no longer imagine anything but itself. Sauron cannot imagine any motives except lust for domination and fear, so that when he has learnt that his enemies have the ring, he thought they might try to destroy it, never enters his head, and his eyes kept towards Gondor and away from Mordor and the Mount of Doom. Which, is true, and a very succinct way of understanding the distinction here between the different moral virtues and the nature of good and evil. And there's a very long post here, and I've been going on for a while, but there were other people that were putting up good defences and talking about Tolkien's life and how things like that. This one I think is probably my favourite from Kevin McLean here. They really get it, to give them credit. So well done.
Is it true? Because Tolkien, after he wrote for years and years, I believe the exact years that he was writing Lord of the Rings, but I'm certain that he not regretted it, but he was disappointed in writing it during his time after he had written it. You thought it was a waste of time, is that correct?
No, I don't think that. He did want the Lord of the Rings to be published as a deal, so basically it would come out with the Silmarillion. He didn't see one as the greatest story or the other. He just saw them as two companion pieces. But the publishers just really wanted a sequel to The Hobbit.
Right.
And so they cared more about getting the Lord of the Rings story down. And obviously the Silmarillion never ended up being published in Tolkien's own life.
Where have I gotten that from then? Is that just complete codswallop then, that Tolkien actually not regretted it, but felt like it was a waste of time in his own merit?
I don't know. I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. I mean,
that is true.
He was remarkably humble when you actually listen to the way he talks about his own inventions and this entire world that he's created.
It could just be him being modest.
Yeah,
could be.
I mean, the entire shrugging.
I wasn't sure whether that was true or not. But yeah, I'd seen it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And the final thing I wanted to point out is that our own government sees it as a far-right extremist text, The Lord of the Rings. And so if our enemies want it banned, it must probably be good.
The thing is with this as well, right? Because the progressives always try to co-opt The Lord of the Rings, and they say, oh, actually, the Fellowship represents the true spirit of diversity as our strength and everything, right? They always play it down that line. One, if it is true that The Lord of the Rings is innately left-wing, then why is it on a prevent list, right? Second of all, of course, it ignores everything that Tolkien actually believed in. And this is, of course, why they hate it. This is why they have to bastardize it. Because ultimately, I hate to do him down because his portrayal was so great, but, with someone like an actor like Viggo Mortensen, who played Aragorn, the actor himself is quite left-wing. And there was one part where the Spanish political party, Vox, used Aragorn in some of their campaigning material, and obviously they're very anti-immigration and everything. And Viggo was just saying this is a total misuse of Aragorn, it totally misunderstands his character. It's like, Viggo, which side did Tolkien support in the Spanish Civil War? Was it the nationalist side, or was it it was a nationalist side? It's just so obvious where Tolkien draws inspiration from.
I wanted to end on this. So This is actually a speech added to the films. It's not in the original books. This was written by Peter Jackson, who was obviously the director of the films and one of his writers. And I think that this epitomises, above all else, not only some of the messaging in the film, but also the fact that the film can inspire things. This doesn't feel out of place in the work of Tolkien whatsoever, and I think is a very beautiful sentiment. And the point being that Tolkien's work was able to inspire this, and it doesn't seem out of place. It sounds like it came out of his pen, I suppose. And I'm going to read it. So this is, of course, when they're in the Two Towers. They're captured by Faramir and in Osgiliath as it's under siege. Yeah. And Frodo says, "I can't do this, Sam." And then Sam says, "I know, it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered, full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if they were too small, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something." And Frodo says, "What are they holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." And if you can't take that message away as being the most pertinent thing for our times, there's something wrong with you. This is, when I read it, it reminded me of my political journey. I came from a literal shire. There was a place round the corner from where I grew up that looked just like the Shire. And I've come to Mordor, Swindon. It even has a great big tower in the middle. It's filled with
Palantir.
And the things I've said and done, I'm not sure I can ever go back to being the person I used to be, because of all of the awful things I've experienced and seen.
We've all felt that.
Yeah, and these sorts of things, if you go through them, truly resonate with you, and they do mean something. There is good in this world to fight for, and I certainly find it very hard to see sometimes, but you do have to remind yourself that it is out there and it's worth fighting for, even if it does sometimes seem like the darkness is winning. You shouldn't lose hope, and you should watch The Lord of the Rings. If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.